Hello, and welcome to the Armwood Opinion Channel. A lot has happened in the past few days, and we're going to be talking about one of the biggest issues. And that issue has to do with Joe Biden and comments he made during and after the debate last Thursday night, where Kamala Harris, the senator from California, called him out on his record on dealing with segregationists, and in particular his record on busing when he was a senator, when he first came into the Senate representing the state of Delaware. She talked about the fact that he opposed busing for integration, which had been a huge issue. It had been a huge issue since the early 60s. Let me give you a little background on the issue before we get up to what happened last Thursday night. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court decided in the Brown versus Board of Education case, the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, that segregation of the races was illegal. It overturned the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896, which said as long as accommodations for the races were equal, that segregation of people by race was constitutional. Brown versus Board, the Supreme Court, headed by Earl Warren, said that in fact that segregation was inherently not equal. Thurgood Marshall was the lead attorney for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which brought the case to the Supreme Court. As a remedy, the court, in a second decision, said that the country should integrate the schools with all deliberate speed. And what did that mean? Normally, when you have a case, the remedy is for an immediate action. In this case, the court did not do that. I think that was kind of outrageous, but they took political considerations and the difficulty of doing it into hand. Okay, the lower courts started trying to figure out a way of integrating the schools, and the way they came up with it was busing. This was not just a Southern issue, it was a Northern issue also, because all of the schools in the United States were segregated by race. In the South, it was by law. which we call de jure segregation. In the North, it was segregated in practice, which we call de facto segregation. I went to a segregated school in Brooklyn for the kindergarten and first and second grades, PS 70. In 1961, the New York City schools started a voluntary integration program, and my parents entered me into the program. I was bused from my home in the in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn, very close to Bushwick. I lived on Jefferson Avenue between Patchen and Ralph, and I'd been going to PS 70, as I mentioned. They bused me out to East Flatbush to a white section, largely Jewish at the time, to go to PS 198. I can remember the first day going to that school like it was yesterday. As I got off the bus, and there were four of us that got off the bus at that school, and the bus was going to different schools. And it was about a half an hour, 40-minute ride away. I may be wrong on the time, but I know it was at least a half an hour. Some white parents spat at us. And I remember being hit with spit. And they were yelling out, "Niggers, go home." I remember this as clear as day. I didn't understand what was going on. We got into the school, went to class that day, and I can remember at lunchtime, after eating my lunch that my mother had prepared for me, I went out into the schoolyard with the other students. As I walked out the door, this boy asked me if I was a nigger. I had never heard the word before. So I told him I didn't know, because I honestly didn't. I didn't know what the word nigger meant. When I came home that day from school that evening, I asked my father, "Am I a nigger?" And my father explained that that was a very, very bad word that bad people use to call, at the time he said Negroes, because that was the term that was used. This was 1961. I was bused from September of 1961 through March of 1962, when my parents moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island. And I moved from the frying pan into the fire. I've done a video about my experiences at both of these schools and throughout my schooling in New York City, so-called liberal New York City, which talks about this. Now it's time to move up to Biden. Biden was a decade later. Busing had been implemented successfully in places like Charlotte, North Carolina, but it was heavily resisted in places like Boston, in the North, where whites, largely Irish, became violent, extremely violent against black students. They were beat. Police cars were turned over. It was basically rioting. I experienced that in Staten Island, the violence, when I was in high school. But, a little bit before this, the period that happened in Boston.
It's tearing them apart. People, as a community, it's tearing them apart. They may say this is helping, it's tearing them apart. I'm not for this, I don't care. My one will not go to school, but it's tearing them apart.
Neighborhoods where our kids are safe. We want our kids safe. We want our children safe. In if I told you to eat shit, you wouldn't violent. Niggas suck. were throwing eggs at the window and trying to hit people with them.
And there was and while we was in school, there was throwing glass at black people and little kids.
What school was this again?
The Roger Claps.
Are you going back to school tomorrow?
No way.
I'm ordering you to disperse in the name of the Commonwealth. If you're not going to disperse, you're going to be arrested.
I think it's going to be all right if everybody come and stop being scared, because, shoot, I don't think there's nothing to be scared of.
But Joe Biden, as a young senator from Delaware, came out very strongly against busing. There's a nice article detailing it in Politico magazine. Biden lied Thursday night. This article that lays it out is how a young Joe Biden turned liberals against integration. Joe Biden opposed busing. In fact, he sponsored legislation to stop court-ordered busing. There was no argument about voluntary busing. That wasn't the issue. School segregation was done purposefully. It was done because the people didn't want to integrate. That was what the problem was. Segregation wasn't, this thing that would just happen by itself. Thursday night, Joe Biden said, "Oh, well, I oppose with the Department of Education ordered busing." Well, that was the court-ordered busing that ordered the Department of Education to do it because of patterns of segregation. The segregation was done in the South by law. In the North, it was done by housing patterns, redlining. Black people couldn't move in certain neighborhoods. Oh, believe me, I know about this. My mother had difficulty buying a house in a majority white neighborhood, and we were the second family to move in. The first family to move in, we ended up moving across the street from them. Their house was bombed 2 years before we moved in. We didn't know it at the time. My best friend is a cousin of that family that was bombed. They were of West Indian ancestry. The Richards, their home was bombed on Beeman Avenue between Castleton and Henderson Avenue on Staten Island. Biden is lying through his teeth because he wants black support. And the sad thing is we have some Uncle Toms that know better or should know better that are supporting him in spite of this and don't want to face the reality. The problem is, yes, people make mistakes. He was on the wrong side of justice back then. Yes, he should have known better. There were plenty of Republicans and Democrats who were on the other side. He fought with this issue with the Republican senator from Massachusetts last name Brooke, who was a black Republican senator who strongly supported busing. He and Joe Biden clashed about it. You can read about it in the article. I remember it happening. I read the New York Times every day. I knew what was going on. I know who Joe Biden was. I was not happy when President Obama picked him because of his record on civil rights and busing. But Obama did it. He's a politician. He did it to try to get the working class whites in Pennsylvania and Ohio. That's, in fact, who Biden cares about. That's why he made those offensive statements on Thursday because he doesn't care about black folks. He cares about those folks. Yes, he has supported some civil rights actions, but he opposed it when it was crucial. Eventually, because of the violence, most black people came to oppose busing. I hated my experience with it, but I still supported it because I thought it was necessary. But the big issue was the violence. A lot of the media that's reporting it is not talking about that because they don't want to talk about how violent white people are. I experienced it on Staten Island. I know what it's like to have my eyes shut for 3 weeks because of racial violence and to be called nigger every day in the classroom and having it chanted. So it was not a very pleasant experience. And it helped shape who I am today. One of the reasons I'm politically active was because of my experience in the integration of schools. I'll put a link to my 3-part video playlist on that experiences below. But what I want to focus on the fact is that Joe Biden is lying about his record. CNN uncovered letters where he was seeking and received the support of segregationist Stennis. And also, North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms in his push against busing. Remember, Biden was from Delaware, a border state. He sided with the racists. A couple of weeks ago, he praised those guys. That's what Kamala Harris started out talking about. That was her first point before she went to busing. These people were staunch racists. She said it hurt. Yes, it hurts to hear a white man praise our enemies, people who were out to hurt people of color like myself. It's not a nice thing. And Joe Biden, to me, disqualified himself as a candidate for president. I've supported Kamala Harris from the beginning because I felt that she was the only one who could challenge or the occupant of the White House successfully in a debate and in the election. And Joe Biden just wasn't smart enough. He didn't have the competence to do it. And he proved it in the first debate. And he got angry when he got called on his truth. If you don't believe it, go back and look at the video. He got angry at Kamala Harris. The lying about it. If he had owned up and said, yes, I was wrong, I did that, that was a popular position at the time, I could accept it. But what I can't accept is the fact that he lied about his opposition to integration. You know, you see the article, one of the many articles, go online. You can get, there's videotape of him speaking against integration through court-ordered busing. The guy's a liar. We have to not support him. And I'm going to end this video here. Check the like button if you like this button. If you want to hear more truth-telling, progressive politics, hit the subscribe button. Understand the Democratic Party right now is in a pretty sad shape. We have some good young congresswomen there. You know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and a couple of others. But that the House of Representatives is in sad shape. We don't have a leader. We have an accommodationist. And we can't afford that anymore. This is the era of Trump. We have to beat Trump, and Biden demonstrated that he can't do it. All right now, have a good day. And remember, resistance is not futile.